The next group are the Actinobacteria. Most people are familiar with the pathogens in this group. So who are the pathogens? Let's see. Micrococcus, that's not much of a pathogen, but you see it all the time. This grows in, I mean, all you have to do is take a swab of one of the drinking fountains around campus and you'll find lots of micrococcus. Who else is in here? Mycobacterium, Nocardia. Those are the really awful ones, right? Propionibacteria is an abundant skin symbiont in people. It causes breakouts on your face, but it lives all over your skin anyway. It's probably the single most abundant organism on your skin. Frankie is also a pathogen. These organisms are also really important because of many of them produce important antibiotics. So the other group are the firmicutes, things like bacillus that produce lots of antibiotics. But the filamentous actinobacteria, like Actinobacterium and Streptomyces, also produce lots and lots of antibiotics. These things are aerobic respirers, so they grow by oxygen-consuming respiration. Some of them are moderately thermophilic. Some of the firmicutes are also moderately thermophilic, but generally speaking, they're mesophiles. They're quite common in soil environments. They come in all shapes and sizes. They do not form endospores, but they do very often form round resting stage cells that people call spores. Many of them have mycolic acid layers. We talked about that before. Here's one of my favorites. This organism is actually quite common in the soil, one of the really abundant creatures in soil, and you've probably never heard of it before, Arthrobacter globiformis. Most of you have seen this under a microscope, though. Notice the way the cell division works. When the cells divide, the cell wall doesn't break away cleanly, and the result is it continues to grow, and you get these acute angles between cells, particularly pairs of cells, sometimes more than pairs. People call this snapping division. In maybe not the most politically correct way, people also call this Chinese letter division. I don't know what Chinese letter that looks like. That's kind of weird. Corynebacterium diphtheria, of course, is in this group as well. And if you're not vaccinated, you better get that done. Do you know that diphtheria is common in adults? Babies get it and suffer very badly. In fact, it's often fatal. Adults get it and they don't suffer very badly. They just have a persistent cough. It's sometimes called the 100-day cough. I've had it before. It doesn't cause you generally much problems. The problem, of course, is that you're contagious and you don't want to give other people the same thing. This organism, this is one of my favorites. Streptomyces antibioticus, an important producer of antibiotics. I think streptomycin in this particular case, but different. No, I'm sorry, this is Coeliacolor. But antibioticus is really closely related. This thing is multicellular, no question about it. It is not related to filamentous fungi, but has undergone a striking convergent evolution. It has the same ecological niche, and as a result, morphologically and in terms of its life cycle, is very similar to filamentous fungi. And so this organism, really common in soil environments, where it sends out vegetative hyphae. These are filaments. These are syncytial hyphae. And so they don't have individual cell walls. The nuclei float freely all together in the same cytoplasm. These filaments are branched. You don't normally see that in bacteria. But can you imagine why branching would be really important for an organism that doesn't have cell walls between them like this? What's that? bore around in the soil, that's a pretty good thing. But think about how these things grow. Remember where cell wall growth occurs. Cell wall growth occurs on a rod-shaped organism at the tip, right? There's a ring right around, you've got a hemisphere and then a ring of cell wall growth. And so a rod-shaped organism will get longer and longer and longer and then divide. And now you've got more rings of growth in the middle where the two cells form. But if you don't divide, if you keep getting longer and longer, you still only have two growth rings. And so what happens when those growth rings can't keep up with the growth anymore because your filament is now 1 meter long and you want to grow 1 centimeter every hour? It can't keep up with that. And so you form side branches which can create more growth rings and you can continue to grow. You can the only way to maintain logarithmic growth in a filament like this is to start forming branches. These vegetative hyphae then, when starved, will produce aerial hyphae. These things grow up into the air. And these aerial hyphae actually start to segment, and so they produce individual cells at the end, and those cells differentiate into spores. These spores often have elaborate decorations on them, filaments, spines, curlicues, etc., and are carried away by the air or water to find a richer environment. Notice that there's programmed cell death. The red here is dead, and the green is alive. And so the hyphae in the ground undergo programmed cell death, and the nutrients go up to the aerial hyphae. And then the aerial hyphae undergo programmed cell death, and the nutrients go to the spores. This is a hallmark of multicellularity. The acid-fast bacteria are in here. You know all about them, things like mycoplasma, mycobacterium. In my little description here, I talk about Mycobacterium ulcerans because it's not one you've probably heard of. You think of lepri and tuberculosis. Ulcerans is a real problem, but in the third world it causes beruli, which is a necrotic ulceritis, and is disfiguring. And unfortunately, like tuberculosis and like leprosy, it's really hard to treat. And so people get these disfiguring disease, probably transmitted by aquatic insects. Exactly what species is unknown. And so, you know, it's an awful disease, and it's actually quite common, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa.